We want to welcome everyone to our third DEBI event. And this one's going to be obviously with Dr. Jay Carriere. And just a few notes early on. This is actually the first event that we're doing with multiple schools being involved. So we want to welcome everyone from U of T that took their time out. So welcome, guys. We hope you like the event. And just a quick introduction of Dr. Carriere. I'm sure he'll talk about himself as well. But Dr. Carriere is a 2018 Schulich grad, and he associated in the Toronto area, I believe in Mississauga, Etobicoke, and North York for around a year. And now he's the owner of 5 different practices, and definitely a role model that we can all learn from. So without further ado, we'd like to introduce Dr. Jake Carriere. So Dr. Jake, take it away.
Thanks for the intro, man. I appreciate it. I told you, man, you're supposed to, set the bar low for me, and that way, I can hopefully exceed expectations. But apparently, you didn't get the memo. But that's all good. But yeah, so, hi guys, thanks for joining me today. I know that it's a Wednesday night. You don't have to be here, but I appreciate it anyway. I see there's like 30 Christian Samuels and I'm not sure what's going on there. I don't know if you guys could see that. But yeah, as Bob mentioned, I did graduate from Western until 2018. I probably even know some of you guys. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, I do have another talk. This is my YouTube talk. It's about like practice startups and how to find locations and I talk about buying practices as well. So I really dive deep into that. And if you just Google or YouTube rather, Dentistry Disrupted in my name, you'll be able to see that presentation there as well. And I have another one as well. It's on, you see Dentistry Academy. So I am affiliated with that. It's like kind of like a CE training academy. And we had a month-long kind of webinar series, like a Zoom webinar series during the lockdown of dental offices, because apparently we had nothing else better to do. So we did that. And so if you just Google Dentistry Academy and my name as well, you'll see that too. So my goal today is I know that there's some first years all the way to 4th years today. So I didn't really know what to target my talk to. I kind of just trying to hit on everything here. And if you want to dive deeper into certain areas like practice ownership and finding locations and diving really deep into the numbers and how to find these opportunities, then those two are the ones to go into. But I wanted to do something a little different today, and that way you don't see the same thing over and over again. So yeah, these are my practices as of now. As you can see, the red ones are the ones that I currently either own or this one actually we're building right now. This one I marked it in blue because that's another location that I was supposed to build, but things fell through with the landlord, but definitely got my eye on it. And as you can see, I mean, it kind of makes like, triangle around a common area, right? And that's kind of my goal, is to have like a cluster of practices that are decently close to one another, because we could draw resources from each other. And also I am like one of the co-founders of a management company, like a dental management company. And honestly, without them, I would still be able to do what I do, but it wouldn't be the same. Like I would be a lot more stressed than I am right now. So they really handle a lot of the kind of day-to-day operations and the behind the scenes things that us as dentists, I mean, not only do we not really have time for it, but we don't have the expertise for it unless we actually go to business school as well. And I'm sure, as you all know, you don't really learn a lot of business in dental school. I know that's shocking for you to hear, right? So I think first and foremost, I got to talk about, your idea of success versus mine. And I talk a lot about, owning practices and multiple ownership, but it doesn't mean that you have to do this. So don't think that, if you're not going to be doing this, like if you're not going to own one or more practices, that you're not going to be successful and that's not going to be good enough. You could be an associate. That's fine, right? So it all depends on what makes sense for you. Not everybody's going to be wired to do, even one practice. Some people don't even want to do one. Most people don't want to do multiple. A lot of people like the idea of doing multiple, but they don't know why they want to do it. And then maybe when they start to do it, I know many people who have gotten to around the 5 practice mark, and then they just sold to Dental Corp or some other corporation because it wasn't what they wanted, right? They realized that it was too many headaches, and they just sold, right? So just make sure that you know what your idea of success is. And it doesn't mean that mine has to be yours, right? So in first year, I'll tell, like, as you know, I mean, there's plenty of things to focus on in dental school, but I'd say that if you're not on Dentaltown already, there's a lot of free continuing education on there. I didn't know this right away. I wish I had though, because you could actually learn a lot more on Dentaltown. It's just an online form only for dentists, right? And just make a free account as a dental student, sign up for free continuing education classes and learn more than you will in dental school. Like it's really good. Once you get into second year, I mean, again, you could still do the free continuing education, right? Another thing that I've mentioned before, it's called breakaway seminars. It's kind of like a practice management CE company in San Antonio. I believe they're doing some online stuff now because of the whole situation that we find ourselves in. But yeah, it's great. I went to their practice kind of startup seminar at the end of my second year. I would really, strongly suggest anybody who's even thinking at all about practice ownership to attend one of their classes, either in person or online. Not sure which ones are going to be available when you want them, but I definitely would recommend looking into that. They have a bunch of different seminars, but I'd say start with the startup one and then go from there. Third year, still do the Dentaltown CE. You could do breakaway, right? If you didn't do it in second year, or if you want to do another breakaway seminar, that's totally fine, right? Onlineoralsurgery.com. That's a really good. It's not free, but I mean, I think the cost was around maybe 50 USD per month or something like that. You can either do it on your own, or I know that times are tough and finances are definitely an issue in school. Just make one account for one person and share the video. Let's get together online and share the videos together and learn some oral surgery. It's a guy, he's an oral surgeon in California, and he has a loop camera. So you could see everything that he's doing in the first person, and you see it from his vantage point. So that I learned a lot from that. And I started doing that in third year. And it really, for me anyway, like it really increased my confidence in surgery. And when I got into the surgery clinic, I wasn't crapping my pants as much as I probably would have been if I didn't watch any of those videos and I didn't learn from them. Another thing I didn't mention in this seminar or in this lecture are mission trips, because I don't know when those are going to be happening again. But mission trips are great. I went to one. I went to one in dental school in the Philippines with a company called Work the World. There's another one. I believe it's Health Missions Outreach, and they go to Guatemala. I've heard that one's really good. There's one more that is called 1,000 Smiles. I haven't gone to it, but I hear you do a lot of extractions. And that one was in Jamaica. Again, I don't know when those will be available again, but definitely something worth looking into as well. And if anybody needs the links for that, just let me know, and I could find them for you. Like I said, I didn't go to all of them, but I've heard many good things about them. And start shadowing. It's never too early to start shadowing some dentists. And if you don't know where to start, I mean, just you could reach out to me. I mean, I've had many people shadow me, and there's plenty of dentists out there that are willing to teach and willing to have you come to their office. Even now with COVID, like it's totally fine to come in, right? So in fourth year, still do Dentaltown CE. Obviously now you're preparing for your board exams. For board exams, all I used really, and you'll see when you're in fourth year, but there's a bank of questions that is passed down year to year. All we did was we worked on those, and we made like a shared Google Doc, and it's multiple choice, right? So I'd have like, let's say my column, and then I'd have my friends and all my other classmates, and we would just mark down our answers for them, like D, E, F, whatever it was. And if there's ever a discrepancy between the answers, we'd talk about it. And then but if they're all the same, then we could pretty much assume that we all got it. Or I guess, you could assume we all got it wrong as well, but the likelihood is we got it right. So that's all I did really. I did that, like all the question banks. We got through like, I believe maybe half to 3/4 of the booklet, because there's a lot of questions. And for the OSCE, which is like the kind of, practical portion, like the bell ringer style question portion, I just used the same resources that were passed down. So for the OSCE, they pass down questions for that year to year. And that's all you really need. That's all you really need for that. You could like add more to that if you want, but I'm telling you that's all you need to pass. Like if you just do those and know those really well, that's the only thing that you need to pass. That's what most of us did. And again, shadowing, right? It's never too late. It's never too early to shadow, and you can never do it too much because you're always going to pick up something new from somebody different. And you might even pick up something new from the same person as well. So again, like just start reaching out to some dentists, start shadowing. And obviously you're going to be looking for jobs as well in fourth year, right? Let's talk about that a little bit. So job search, obviously from your shadowing, that'll make you a lot of connections and a lot of kind of, you're just going to start building your network of kind of like-minded professionals. And that's how I found some pretty nice jobs, was just shadowing people, making connections. I played on the hockey team. I don't know if anybody else here does, but I actually got one of my first jobs through one of the reps who was, he's a big hockey guy. So fourth years, I mean, I don't know how many there are here now, but starting in January 2021, which is coming up soon, that's when you're going to start, sending emails with your resumes to all the big supply companies, right? Like Patterson, Henry Schein, Sinclair, dental labs. Just send them kind of know what area you want to work in. Find the reps in that area. You just Google search and send them emails, just introducing yourself, asking them if they know of anybody looking for associates, and send your resume on there. You'd be surprised how many of them will get back to you. It's in their best interest to have a good relationship with you because they're going to want you to use their products, of course. So that's how I found my jobs. I just reaching out to supply reps. And of course, you could contact me as well. I mean, feel free to contact me if you're looking at certain areas. I could always, even if I don't know of any offhand, I can definitely point you in the right direction. I just found 2 associates for one of my locations. So we're always looking, and we kind of have a bit of our finger on the pulse of who is looking or who we can set you up with. And for all years, I know this is important, and we were talking about this earlier, but just make lifelong friends and have fun. And that's the thing that most people forget about. I was telling the guys when we were having our meeting before the talk here that, when you're in dental school, it seems like you're like, when the hell am I going to get out of here? Like, I just want to get out. It's a grind, definitely is. I'm not taking that away from you, but you don't realize that right now, they're great years. I mean, you're all in a crappy situation, but you're all in that situation together. So everybody kind of is in the same boat, and the struggles of everybody that you're with. And you have a lot of people to talk to about that. And once you get out, it's pretty much, you're on your own. And unless you make a network of kind of like-minded people, which I definitely recommend. But yeah, once you get out, I mean, you're pretty much on your own, and it can be a lonely profession if you choose for it to be that way. So definitely have fun while you're in there. Enjoy it. I always tell people to, like, dental school is like getting your ticket into the park, and what rides you choose to go on in the park is up to you. And that's a really good transition to kind of like some continuing education, right? And because with continuing ed or good quality continuing education, it's going to take your career to the next level for sure. This is Dentistry Academy. Full disclosure, I am involved with a company. Like I'm one of the instructors there. But I mean, there are some awesome courses there, and it's ran by us. And we kind of know that hands-on education is the best. And also we know that, as a company, like if we provide people with bad education, nobody's going to come back. So, I mean, it's really in our best interest to give you the best experience possible as well, right? And just a quick example, I mean, like there is a surgical mentorship for the GP, and it's a full weekend hands-on live surgeries. I've helped with this for 2 years in a row now. This year, unfortunately, couldn't make it, but I'm definitely going to go to one. We're having one in February as well, so I'm going to be helping out with that. But here's where we tackle some of these cases, right? Like some wisdom teeth, and you get to do it with us. We have your back, so if anything happens, we're there, and they're live patients. And the nice part is that if you find one of your own patients and bring them, you could actually bill the patient, right? I mean, you give them a deal, right, if they don't have any insurance, but you can build a patient, and that way you're pretty much getting your money back for the course that same day, right? Just an example. So I am an instructor there, but it doesn't mean I can't take courses myself there too, right? So just this past weekend, I went to London and I did a sinus lifting course with implants. I've been placing implants now for about 2 years, but I was doing some pretty minor sinus lifts. But this is one of the cases I did. Actually, you could see, and I know that this is like, you don't learn a ton about implants, but basically, you see there's not a lot of bone there, right? And that line is the sinus right here. So if you didn't lift that sinus up and put bone up there, you wouldn't really have a lot of space to put the implant. So in that surgery, I did the sinus lift here, sinus lift on this side as well, and placed 2 implants there. And that was all under like, guidance and mentorship of other dentists as well. And so it's a safe learning atmosphere. And you learn a very large amount of information in a very short amount of time. This wasn't one of my cases, but I was watching this one. So by the way, this was done. You probably even know him. I'm not going to say names or anything, but he was a 2019 grad. And so he's only been up for a year and he's doing this already. And he was doing this at the course. So this is a big flap here. He took a tooth out that had a big infection. As you can see, there's a big void there now. It's a big hole. That's an implant that he placed right here with a sinus lift. So this, this is the bone graft. So he put bone grafting on there. He put a membrane over the bone graft and then he sutured it closed. So in one appointment, he did an implant, sinus lift, took a tooth out, big bone graft, membrane, closed it. And he's doing that 1 year out, right? And that was under the guidance and mentorship of all of us. Again, full disclosure, I'm involved with companies that I'm promoting, of course, but I don't endorse or get involved with anything unless I believe in the results and I know that it works. So again, we continue ahead. I'm not involved with this course, but it's a great one. It's Dr. Peter Nakanta's nitrous and or moderate sedation course. And I know when I was in school, we were all offered to do this in 4th year. If they don't offer it, just ask about it, but I'm pretty sure they're still offering it. And if you're into surgery or anything really, I mean, even you can do this with restorative too. Being able to offer patients nitrous or moderate sedation, I mean, it's very big for case acceptance. So it's a very good course to take as well. Let's talk a little bit about money, right? Because I find not a lot of people talk about this. I know that, so Vic Jindal, I'm sure you guys all know him. He's actually one of the more transparent, probably the most transparent guy out there. And he's probably already talked to you about this, but I'm going to dive a bit deeper into the numbers here. And I'll kind of tell you, what to expect, once you graduate, right? And of course, like this is extremely variable, right? Depending on a huge number of factors, like, it depends on the person, right? It depends on your motivation, depends where you're located, demographics of the practice. I mean, the list goes on, right? So that's why a lot of people don't talk about this, is because it is super variable, right? But that's where a lot of people leave it. They just say, oh, it's variable. They don't really tell you anything, right? So I'll kind of let you know. And typically, so you, as an associate, you're making 40% of your collections. So for example, like if you produce $1,000 and your office has to collect that money now, right? So the ideal situation is they collect all the $1,000 and then you get 40% of that $1,000, which is $400. So that's how you get paid typically as an associate. For a new grad, you should be billing about $1,500 to $2,000 a day. Right. Again, this is variable, but this is kind of what I notice. After 1 to 2 years, most are billing between the $2,000 to $3,500, $2,000, $3,500 kind of a day. After 2 years, usually, depending on the person, again, don't quote me on all these numbers, right? But usually it's $3,500 plus per day. But it's extremely variable again. I know people, who consistently do $5,000 to $10,000 a day. I also know some who do $1,000 a day, right? So it's very, very, very variable, but I'd say this is kind of the average, right? And so we'll dive in a bit more. So you guys are going to be new grads, fairly soon, right? So I mentioned billing $1,500 to $2,000 a day, right? Your 40% salary, assuming that they collect all of that, right, would be about $600 to $800 per day. That's your 40% salary. About $2,400 to $3,200 a week. About $9,600 to $12,800 per month. And yeah, so it typically that's where they get that figure, $115,000 to about $153,000 generally in your first year. And that's why, Vic will say like the 135,000 number, because he's kind of probably taking an average of this, right? But again, I've seen a lot of new grads do a lot more. I've also seen them do a lot less, but full disclosure, usually the ones who do a lot less than that are working, part-time, only a couple of days a week, or they're just not in the mindset to produce. They don't really care about it. So they just go in, do, a few fillings and leave, and that's fine for them, right? But you can do a lot more than this, right? Just to let you know, like full disclosure, I did a lot more than that, because it's just all your mentality. The bottom line, just don't sacrifice quality, right? Quality comes number one. Don't try to beat these numbers with just subpar volume dentistry, right? You'll make enough no matter what. But it doesn't give you permission to, I don't want to give you permission to spend like crazy while in school. I don't want you to take these numbers and say, oh my God, those are big numbers. I'll pay off my debt, right? And again, leading into that, don't fall for the, oh, don't worry, you'll pay it off in no time. Don't worry about it. It's fine. That's a very dangerous mindset, I think, because then you could really start spending like crazy and not really focusing on the consequences of your actions, right? So like, for example, if you have 300K in debt, which is probably pretty average, just because you're making 150,000 doesn't mean you'll pay it off in 2 years, right? It doesn't work that way. And because you have, of course, living expenses, unexpected expenses, taxes. If you incorporate as well, you actually will pay off your debt slower. And again, I'm not an accountant, but I'll jump into this really quickly, and I'll try to keep it as simple as possible. But when you incorporate, obviously your accountant is going to tell you when it makes sense for you to incorporate. And usually this is when you're making, I believe it's like around the 150 to 200,000 range or more, or if you own a practice, you incorporate. And the reason for that is it allows you to pay less income taxes by sheltering some of your paychecks into a corporation. Because if you're making like over 200 grand a year and you're not incorporated, you're going to pay so many taxes on that. Like it's going to be crazy. So it allows you to shelter some of it. So for example, you're making 20,000 a month, right? Salary. And these are just random numbers, but your accountant will tell you, they'll work it all out with you. But let's say in this example, $8,000 will be paid to you out of the 20,000, right? 4,000 has to be paid in taxes, right? From your corporation. That just goes directly to the CRA. And 8,000, so you have leftover money that stays in your corporation. So the 8,000 plus 4,000 plus 8,000, that's your 20,000. So that's where all of that goes, right? So in this example, you have 8,000 per month to live on. So that 8,000 paid to you. The rest of it is in your corporation. The only way you can take it out is if you pay taxes on it. So you pay normal taxes on it, right? And a lot of times it's not really beneficial to take it out because you're just going to pay a lot of taxes on it, right? So on the subject of finances, I think it's definitely important, right? I mean, it's not about money for sure, but to achieve financial freedom, I think that's important for everybody, right? And so main thing is try to keep your personal debt, as low as you can, but at the same time, you still got to enjoy yourself once in a while. I say trips. I mean, that's not really in the cards right now, but whenever that's available. Bar nights, again, not really, we don't have to worry about that. So you guys are going to save a lot of money. You'll be fine. But yeah, definitely treat yourself every once in a while, right? Don't go crazy. Have a plan to pay off your line of credit as quickly as possible. Don't just get in the mentality of saying, oh, interest is so low. Why pay it off all the way? I mean, I'm just going to sit on the loan and just pay the interest off. Like, don't do that. So, I mean, in my opinion, just get it out of the way as soon as you can, right? And when your line of credit is paid off, then you could set aside, I recommend like around 3 to 6 months of expenses. Like just set it aside as like an emergency kind of thing, and don't touch it unless you need to for an emergency. But that's just like a safety cushion there, right? And then once you have that, you can start investing a percentage of your income monthly. That's what you should be doing. So once you start making money and you're out of debt, you should start having your money start working for you, because that's really the way to achieve, in my opinion, personal financial freedom. Bottom line is I don't want to be a burden on society or any of my loved ones. Like I don't want to be that guy who, his I'm old, when I get older, I don't want anybody to have to take care of me. Like I want to be able to have my own money to just, if anything happens, I'll be okay and my family will be okay, right? And let's just go over an investing example. Like full disclosure, I'm not a financial advisor. You guys know that. But I just want to go over a quick example just to kind of maybe get you start to think about it. Because I didn't think about it when I was in dental school. And I think the sooner you start thinking about this, the better you'll be. And you maybe have that mindset shift. Let's say, for example, you start investing $2,000 a month. Like once you have all your debt paid off and everything. So you start investing $2,000 a month. And as you notice, I mean, you're going to get paid enough as a dentist, $2,000 a month. You'll be able to set that aside as long as you're not spending like you're a rich dentist, right? So like you got to be careful with that. And where do you invest this from? I mean, you can invest it from your personal salary, or you can invest it from your remember that corporation that I mentioned. So the money's sitting in the corporation instead of just sitting there. You could have it started. You could start investing it and having it work for you instead of just sitting there, right? That's what I'm doing. And obviously, I mean, if you don't want to do this on your own, I highly recommend working with a guy like Vic Jindal. He manages a lot of dentist finances. So I definitely recommend, talking to him about this when the time is right. Let's say on that $2,000 a month that you're investing for 30 years, you get a 10% return on that every year. And that's conservative. I mean, it totally depends on what stocks or indexes that you pick. And again, if you want to talk to me about this, you can too. Again, I'm not a financial advisor, but Vic is the guy as well to talk about that. But let's say you get a 10% return, right? Vic will probably quote you 7%, but I think he's been a little conservative. But yeah, 10%, let's say. After 30 years, this is how much, that $2,000 a month. So if you're doing that every single month for 30 years, you would have put in $720,000 over 30 years, right? Sounds like a lot, but it's only $2,000 a month, and you just keep doing that, right? If you put that much in at a 10% return rate, this is your final investment value, over $4 million. And let me just show you this. So at the bottom, these are the number of years. So like these are years, that's time, and this is money here. The green are your deposits. So that's the 2,000 per month that you're putting in, right? So that stays pretty consistent, pretty linear, because you're not changing the amount that you're investing. But this allows that the wonder of compound interest or compound growth to work. That's basically you just earn growth and interest on top of your previous growth and interest. So it just keeps snowballing. And then at the beginning, it's slow, but then at the end, it goes crazy. So all this orange here, that's just your total interest earned. So the amount of money you've earned on top of your initial money, and you're earning this just by investing it into something that grows consistently. That's the power of compounding over time. And that's how you turn, $700,000 into $4+ million. And so again, this is not a finance talk, but I just want to kind of maybe plant that seed in your mind so that you're thinking about it now. And, when the time is right, that you can really, you can do your own research anytime. And then when the time is right, you can execute, right? And this talk, I just kind of wanted to do a quick one because I know that, when you talk for too long, sometimes people stop listening. And I have my other talks as well that are all good. And I know that I'm going to be answering questions today. So like I was telling the guys, I'm good all night. I set aside the night for you guys. So ask away. But basically, you got to find a mission, right? And find a purpose, right? Because we get used to everything, including money. I remember, like it was yesterday, because it was only 2 years ago. I remember being in your position in dental school, thinking about, oh man, we're going to do very well financially and it's going to be awesome. We're going to make a lot of money. I remember my first paycheck and I thought it was a mistake because I thought they added a zero to it or something. Like I was like, wow, like we're getting paid this much. But you get used to that. It's crazy. Like I'm 2 years out now and that's no longer a motivating factor for me anymore because you get used to it, as weird as that sounds. So you need a purpose, you need a mission, right? It's all about the process. Like my mission is to just influence as many people as possible in a positive manner. And I'm doing that obviously by doing my dental treatment on people. but also by treating my staff very, very well, providing them a good workplace, hiring staff, giving them jobs. And also with the training academy and with new offices, we're finding dentists to grow with us. And so in this market, it's very tough, as you know, to find any dental opportunities or any place to buy or start a practice. And, we're changing, or I'm trying to change dentists' careers and get them on the right trajectory. And by that, they can in turn help even more people, right? They can help their patients, they can help their staff, and they can help other dentists. I mean, so for every dentist or healthcare professional you influence, they're going to influence that many more people, and then it just continues, right? So that's why I get up every morning. It's not money, it's this. And in dentistry, like, we have a lot of control over our careers and personal lives. I really do believe that it's one of the best professions out there. I mean, I'm biased, of course, but we have so much freedom, especially even if you're an associate, even if you're not an owner, you could work you work as many days or as little days as you want. You work anywhere you want. Like, it's so crazy how much freedom that we have. And I think that we just have to keep checking ourselves. I mean, you guys aren't out of school yet, but once you're out of school, I mean, you got to check yourself every day. You're very, very, we're all very lucky to be in the positions that we are in, right? So that's it. I mean, like I said, it was a quick presentation today, but again, we want to save a lot of times for questions and answers if you guys have any. My email is there. Feel free to send me one anytime. And I also got my cell number there as well. So even if you want to discuss ideas, you want to talk, just send me a text, send me an email. I'm always available. Those are the quickest ways to get a hold of me, because I can't keep track of all my emails usually, or my phone calls. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight on your night off, basically. And yeah, it was a huge honor to talk to you guys, and hope to meet you guys in person someday when we're allowed to.
All right, Dr. Carriere, thank you so much for the presentation. I think you covered a lot of topics that I think people as students and definitely new grads would be interested in. One specifically being the finances of dentistry. Seems like a lot of people are a little bit hesitant to talk about that. A few questions we had during your actual presentation. One of the many, Christian Samuels, asks, without being too invasive, how are some ways that you have invested your money, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah, there's so many different ways and different mindsets, right, to how to invest. The reason I say 10% conservative is because if you look at the S&P 500, which is basically a collection of the 500 biggest companies in the U.S., over the whole time that the S&P has been available, their return rate has been around 11%. So if you just invest in the S&P 500, that's almost as conservative as you can get. That's your 10 to 11%. I'm not really investing into index funds as of now, because I'm younger. I think that I have a lot of I don't want to get just average returns. Like, that's not what I want to do. And I do know that my investment portfolio is, I mean, if I lose everything, which I won't, but hypothetically speaking, if my stock portfolio goes to zero, I'll be fine, because most of my net worth and assets are tied up in dentistry, right? And I'm just doing this on the side. But yeah, I don't know how much stock advice I could give to you, because legally, right? Because I'm not a financial advisor. Again, maybe send me a text and we'll talk. But I don't know if I should talk about this on a big public forum.
That's fair. That's fair. One question that we got more dentistry related was that kind of about solo ownership versus multiple ownership. So do you think that solo ownership dental practices are still kind of sustainable? Because generally at times we've heard that, group dentistry ownership is the future, and that solo ownership is kind of a thing of the past. Why is that sentiment out there in your mind?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the idea of a lot of people like the idea of group ownership. Like, a lot of people like that idea, and they think that's a holy grail. But it does have its disadvantages as well, right? Usually in the States, like in the US, they're about 5 to 10 years ahead of us with dentistry. just in general. So it's good to look at the States as a model of what Canada is going to become in 5 to 10 years. There's a big proliferation of corporations, much more than here. But I truly believe that the solo practice will always be there, definitely. When I had my first practice and I was running that, like it took a lot of time and energy and grind to get it to the level it's at now. But I could have stopped there and I would be just fine. Like I'll be honest with you. I'm not making any more money. I'm not making more money now than I was when I only had one practice, because I'm in my growth phase. So right now I have startups that are not profitable yet. And that's normal, right? To have startups that don't make money right away, especially in a pandemic. That doesn't help. So my main practice is helping to fund my other practices. So instead of taking all the money from my one office and just taking it as a salary, as dividends, I just use that to fuel future growth. So to answer your question, I think the solo practice, I think it'll always be there. But we'll have more DSOs, like dental service organizations, as we go. But it doesn't mean that the solo practice is going to go away.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point about the sustainability of practices. I know in a few of your other talks, you've kind of talked about that magic number of 18 months. That seems to be when the turnover becomes more positive. And that time is like, it's really the kind of like you said, the growth period. Another question we had was more about like the day-to-day, how you practice it. So how much time would you spend that you say that you would spend on like administration and management versus actual clinical dentistry?
Yeah. Right now it's shifting a little. When I first started as an associate, I was working 6 to 7 days a week, like 12 to 15-hour days clinically, right? I don't recommend doing that, by the way, but that's what I was doing for about maybe 6 months. Then when I bought my first practice, I realized I had to change something. So cut my clinical hours down. I worked about, 5 days, sometimes 6, but usually 5. But a lot of that is spent managing as well, because as soon as you own one practice, it never stops, right? You can't just go home and forget about it. There's always something that's going to come up. If I had to estimate now, maybe, I don't know, 60 to 70% of my time is spent on clinical dentistry, and then the other 30 to 40% is spent on management stuff. And that's when I'm at home too. So even when I have a day that I'm at home, not in one of the offices, I'm still doing some work. Like I'm still on the computer answering emails, still having Zoom meetings, conference calls, lawyers, accountants. So there's always something to do for sure. So I'd say, yeah, as of now, maybe 60, 70% still clinical. But again, with my management team, I think that I'd have a lot more clinical time, or a lot less clinical time, if I didn't have a management company.
Right. And one question I personally want to ask, actually, kind of going back to like your associateship days, I guess kind of like a two-part question. So personally, I would say that I think that you associated for just about a year, maybe a year and some change. Would you
Sorry,
say that
what was that? You cut out a bit on that last one there.
Oh, sorry. So personally, I would say that you had associated for a relatively shorter amount of time,
Yeah.
like maybe a year or maybe a little bit more than that. Would you say that you got enough clinical exposure and practice with a variety of procedures that you felt pretty comfortable opening your practice? And also another notion was, did you feel that you saw enough of the management side of dentistry in that short period of time?
Yeah. That's one of the reasons why I worked at multiple practices, is because I found that unless you find that that unicorn practice where you can work 4 to 5 days a week and you're always busy in one practice, I was working in the GTA, so that was very difficult. So I worked at 3 different ones. So I got to see 3 different management styles, 3 different patient bases, and instead of working a full week at one office, I would condense my days, 1 to 2 days at each office. So my schedule was generally busier because they were condensed days. So I feel like I did, 2 years of dentistry in 6 months, or in 5 to 6 months, because I was just did so much. And you have to know your comfort level as well. Like I was always very confident clinically, like even in dental school, like I was pretty confident, and especially with surgeries and endos and you know the specialty stuff, like I was very comfortable with that from the beginning. So I felt confident enough clinically to go ahead and move forward. Business wise, management wise, you're never going to be ready. That's what you have to realize, is that that's why a lot of people uh, never get into practice ownership, or they just wait years to get into it, is because they truly never feel ready. And I don't have a kid yet, but it's like, I think it's like having a kid. You're never going to be ready, but at some point you kind of just have to do it, right? So I think that you're never going to be truly ready, but I'd say that get as clinically competent as you can, because that's just one less thing you're going to have to worry about when you open up a practice or you start one, because it's a huge learning curve in and of itself to learn how to manage a business, how to manage staff. It's a huge learning curve. I'm still learning every day. But if you don't have to worry as much about, you know, being behind clinically, then I think that'll put you in a better place.
And speaking of about your practices that you've already established, I think one of the things that's almost a given in terms of success of your dental practice, in terms of clinic and otherwise, is like the location. So I know you have a few in, I think one in Shelburne, one in Tottenham, and one in
Nobleton.
Nobleton. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobleton and Markdale. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. So how did you go about to actually find the locations? Because I think that's one of the biggest things that you're probably looking at if you want to become a practice owner, finding that perfect location.
Yeah, it's huge. It can make or break you. And I kind of dove deep into this in my dentistry disrupted talk, but I'll kind of summarize it. So I did my own research. Like I would just look at, you know, I was kind of looking at maybe smaller to medium sized towns, a little bit outside of big metropolitan areas, like bigger cities, or just areas that were underserviced. So I was like, and I continue to do this. Like I do it pretty obsessively. Like I look at maps, like, and I find all the towns and cities, and I do research on them. So I find out just the demographics, like how many people. I start out with dentist to population ratio. So that's where I start, right? So how many dentists are there, how many offices, and how many people are there? And generally I look for like a ratio of like one, like an office to population ratio of like 1 to 3,000 is like very good. Harder to find nowadays. But yeah, 1 to 2,000, maybe 1 to 2,500, but 3,000 plus would be very nice. That's where you start. And then from there you dive deeper into like the competition, right? So you look at other offices, you see how they market. Do they have good Google reviews? Do they have a website? It's crazy how a lot of them don't, right? And you kind of look at what are their hours? Are they open Saturdays? Are they open evenings? You know, all these things that you can kind of, like, if you just go into a place where there's other offices that don't have a website, they don't work weekends. They don't, that right there, that's your in, right? It's like you go there and you either buy a practice or open, and you just open a Saturday and you'd be surprised. Like that's what happened to me in Shelburne. In my first office, I noticed nobody was open Saturdays. It was a growing community. Like it was growing like crazy. I bought that office. So I found it on a broker website. And yeah, I opened a Saturday and I worked every Saturday, and it was insane. Like it was so busy. And actually that was how one of the like the main reasons how I built that office was just working Saturdays. And I also opened an evening on Tuesdays, and those are my busiest days. So it's kind of like the demographic analysis plus the competition analysis. And there's actually a company now, and so they're called Confidence Analytics. So CONFIDENS Analytics, and they do like demographic reports for dentists. It costs money, but it's worth it to find a home run location.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think even when we were talking earlier before our seminar started, that you were actually building a new practice, I think in the near future. And one question that we got in the chat was, if you're not buying a practice from a retiring dentist, how would you establish a patient pool? And I think you kind of touched on it, was pretty much try to fill the void that's there in the community. Is that more or less it?
So if you're not buying it from a retiring dentist, like if you're
Yes.
starting one
Yeah.
instead?
Yeah. If you're like starting new, I think.
Yeah, a startup is a whole different ballgame, man. Like that's a loaded question. But a lot of your startups, I would not recommend doing a startup right away. I'd recommend or ever. Some people should never do one. I'll be frank. It's like a lot of people should never do a startup. But I'd say if you're looking to get into practice ownership, start with acquiring a practice, ideally from a dentist who's retiring or willing to slow down, willing to stay on for at least 6 months after you get in there to transition the patients over. And that way you have somebody there, you have a mentor as well. Hopefully they could act as a mentor to you. I'd recommend doing that first. But yeah, startups, like getting new patients in the door, whole different beast, whole different ball game. I don't want to do the disservice of trying to talk about it now, because that's a whole lecture in and of itself. The short answer is like you market heavy from the very beginning. Market very, very heavy. Like your marketing budget should be almost unlimited in a startup at the beginning. And you should be prepared to lose money for, maybe even over a year. You should be prepared to lose money on that practice. And that's why I recommend not doing that first, because if you have another practice that you've already bought that is cash flowing, that's producing cash like every month, you could have that cash in that safety void in order to maybe cover some expenses of that office. And that's how I did it. And that's how I recommend doing it. But the main thing in a startup is if you find like a home run location with like crazy amount of possible patients, and that's going to be like the main thing for your success. And you can make a lot more mistakes if you have like a practice in a good location versus having one in a place where, let's say, there's already 4 dentists and the population is 3,000 people. I mean, you're not going to do well there.
Right. And coming back to your point about having multiple practice, so I was just kind of curious about what your role exactly was. Like, do you go to, like one day a week at each practice, or like, do you travel quite a bit, or how is like the structure of your practice going?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, like everybody has a different kind of mentality and mindset for that. I work out of one practice. And the other practices, I'm always available. Like if anybody ever needs me there, or I'm needed there for a bigger case or anything like that, I can go and do that. But no, I work out of one practice.
Okay. Another question we had in the chat from Mina was, how has the pandemic affected sustaining your practices, and how have things changed now than compared to last year?
Oh, everything has changed. I mean, it's crazy. So like we were shut down. Like when we were shut down, I had 2 locations and I was building a third. So I opened my third startup from scratch in at the beginning of August. So not that long ago, and we're still in the midst of a global pandemic, right? So yeah, it's affected everything. Luckily, I already had my main practice, running efficiently, and I'd owned it for maybe about 1.5 years at this point. And it was cash flowing. That's why, again, I'll stress, like, you should find your first opportunity should be a cash flowing office, or at least one that that you can get cash flowing every month. Like you can get to that point and grow it to that point. It just will make your life a lot easier. But doing startups in a pandemic, I'm like, who does that, right? Like who is doing that? And yeah, right now I've done one already, and I'm doing another one now. And yeah, it's definitely affecting a lot. I mean, we see the schedule collapsing sometimes. In a practice where you have a lot of patients already, the schedule could fall apart multiple times, and you won't know because it'll just be refilled because you have enough patients. But in a startup, I mean, think about it. If you're a patient, let's say my Nobleton office, so that's in the York region. So that's, I guess this red zone, right? And a lot of people don't want to go to a new dental office for a new patient exam and cleaning. They don't see the urgency in that. So we've had some challenges there, and we've had to really pivot and think, how are we going to get through this, and how are we going to innovate and stay relevant and get patients in the door. And I'm still learning that every day. So we're still trying to find new ways how to market to patients. And basically our marketing budget right now is in those practices it's higher than it's ever been, because you got to spend that marketing money, especially in a new practice, to get patients in the door.
Right. And speaking of kind of the finances of certain things, we had a bunch of questions about finances on in our chat. Was one of them was, and I think you've touched on it in some of your other talks, is, you know, what's the cost of starting a practice like the one that you have? And you said like you're mainly work out of one practice at the current moment. How many associates do you have, and you know, what's the supporting staff structure like, if you're comfortable sharing?
Yeah. It depends. So, I mean, I bought my first practice. I bought it for about a 1.7 million. So that was on a bank loan. At the time I bought it, it was doing about 1.05 million a year. It's now doing close to 2. So, but I bought it for 1.7. A startup, or I bought my second office. It was like it was kind of a startup already. So I think it was like 3 years into a startup, but they just couldn't get it off the ground. So I bought it for 450,000. And my startup, so startups, you can spend you can spend a lot on a startup. And that's why I recommend doing the breakaway seminar education. Or you could talk to me about it as well, but I don't know how many things from breakaway I can teach to you legally as well, right? Because it's intellectual property. But my startup, so in Tottenham, we built that for about 400,000. That's low, but that's 6 operatories. It's just all about how efficiently you build things, and not overbuilding either. But it looks great. It looks like $1 million, but I know people who spent, you know, 600,000, $1 million plus just to start an office. I think that's too much. So we're still working and trying to innovate how to get the cost down, but still keep the quality up. But right now we're kind of stuck at that like $450,000 range. We're kind of stuck there. And staff, you're asking staff. So at my main practice, the one I bought, and that's, you know, the existing practice, the one I bought for 1.7. We have a lot of staff because a lot of them are part-time. I believe there's like 14 or 15 staff. Between 2 startups, or the 2 newer practices, I have an associate who goes between the 2, and I also have maybe like 4 staff members between the 2. I have 2 associates on my main practice, so me and 2 associates. And my new practice that I'm building now, we're going to start pretty lean. So we're going to have an associate, a front desk, and an assistant. So generally recommend starting with 3 staff at the beginning. So, well, 2 staff and an associate. So associate, front desk, and an assistant. You don't need to have an office manager at such an early phase. You're just going to be overpaying somebody for that. And notice I didn't say hygienist there. So at the beginning, you should do your own hygiene in a startup, because otherwise you're just going to be sitting there doing nothing. So might as well do the hygiene. And then that way you get to meet new patients, and you get to talk to them and start to know people. And then once you get to the level where your schedule is starting to fill up, now you can hire a part-time hygienist to take that away from you.
And one of the things you said earlier on was, if you do end up doing a startup, was that the biggest thing was, you know, market heavy. What have you found to be some of the more effective marketing techniques? Was it kind of, you know, online, word of mouth, just traffic on by location?
Yeah, it completely depends on the location, and it even goes deeper than that. Like within a location, it varies based on the area of the location. Like it's totally different. I find that, you know, we do mail outs, like, you know, like postcards and stuff like that. Like we do that for our locations. Some places it works wonderfully. Other places it doesn't work very well. A note on that too about postcards. I'm sure you guys have all gotten like a postcard from a dentist in the mail. You probably notice that it just has like stock generic pictures on there of like, it seems like they try to make it, you know, like, you know, they try to make it diverse as well. There's always like a white person and you know, other races as well. I don't know. I noticed that they always try to keep it like that, but just put pictures of your staff and yourself, right? Like make it personalized. Like instead of getting just a random generic image of a person that nobody knows, like put the staff and dentist there, right? It's simple as that. Like it's a simple touch, but it's a personal touch that people appreciate. Well, yeah, we do mail outs. They work pretty well depending on the location. We do a lot of online stuff like SEO, like, you know, search engine optimization. We do like Google reviews are huge, right? So we do a lot of like internal marketing to do Google reviews. A good way of doing that is like your internal referrals are going to be huge in your office. So you kind of make an internal referral program within your office. So let's say you have somebody who comes into the office and they're a new patient, you know, you send them a handwritten note after, say, thank you so much for choosing us as your office. Thank you for trusting us. We're always accepting new patients. And if they send somebody else there, so let's say somebody else comes in, oh, hi, Mrs. Jones, how did you hear about us? Thanks for choosing us. Oh, you know, Johnny referred me. Oh, great, Johnny who? And you find out who that Johnny is. If they're one of your patients, you send a thank you letter to Johnny saying, thank you so much for referring Mrs. Jones to the office. And you just give a little, like, maybe, you know, Tim Hortons gift card in there, something simple. And you also send a letter to the new patient, Mrs. Jones, saying, thank you so much for choosing us. We're always accepting new patients. You know, it's like just little things like that. That doesn't cost you anything. I mean, it costs you a little bit for the gift cards, but I mean, you're getting a new patient, right? So that's a huge thing. And internal referrals, they work very well for existing practices and also work well for startups. And that's how you get Google reviews as well. You just ask the patients, right? Thank you so much. I hope you had a great experience. Well, you have to know they had a great experience, right? So, and then you ask them, hey, you know, would you mind leaving us a Google review? We really appreciate it. That's the best compliment that we can get. And you send them the link. You send them the link to do it. That way they just click on the link. It brings them to the page. Easy. They write it. Otherwise, they're probably not going to do it, right? Unless you give them the best experience ever. But Google reviews are huge. Internal marketing is huge, like internal referrals. But you got to track everything that you do. Otherwise, you're just sending stuff out and you're not knowing what's working and what's not working. So if patients come in, every new patient is asked how they found us, how did they hear about us. That way, if like nobody's finding us through their postcards, maybe we don't send postcards anymore. Maybe we just save some money and focus our energy on what's working. So that's hopefully answered the question there.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to like the patient experience. I think a small amount of emotional intelligence and some proactiveness that goes a long way for the patients. Once they actually feel like they like that they're cared for and like someone actually takes time out of the day to make their experience better, I think they kind of builds like a connection there. And one of the things that someone was curious in the chat was, with all these 5 practices that you have and soon to be a 6th, do you bring in specialists to your practice, or do you normally refer out? And I know you've done quite a lot of CE, so I'm sure you're getting more comfortable with the complicated cases. But how's like the scope of specialists in your practice?
Yeah, I don't have any specialists at my office as of now. I find that my startups aren't at the point where it makes sense to do that, because the patient base is not big enough to line up cases for a specialist, right? And so, you know, the guy that we have on board, like our associate, we make sure that he's comfortable doing, you know, some specialty procedures. But whatever he's not comfortable with, I mean, either I can come in and get it done, or if it's really complicated, then we just refer out. That's totally fine to refer, right? But I don't have any specialists coming into my offices right now. But I do know that one of my partners, he's in the London area, and he has, you know, some bigger practices as well, and he does bring in specialists. So he brings in like an ortho to come in, you know, once a month. He'll bring a perio, so periodontist, to come in once or twice a month. He's got a pediatric dentist as well. And so, yeah, it totally depends on your model and what you want and how many practices you have and how big the practices are. But it's definitely, it could be very good, but sometimes it sounds better than it is, because sometimes you have to completely shut down the practice just for that one specialist. They usually take a bigger percentage, like a bigger cut. You often pay for their staff as well, depending on what it is. So a lot of times you could actually do better and produce, not exactly produce more, but maybe take home more if you just have a regular day of dentistry. But it totally depends on the situation. Doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but it definitely depends on the practice, and it can really make sense for a practice. So it really can, like, it could boost the practice's revenue by quite a bit. A good example of that is UCC Dental. So it's in UCC, owned by one of my buddies. And when he brings in an oral surgeon, like once or twice a month, and it makes sense. Look at the patient population. It's all people in their 20s, and that's a good time to get the wisdom teeth out. So that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense there.
Right. And one of the concerns I'm sure that students have, and you kind of touched on it in your presentation, is how did you find the balance of student debt with the financials of starting a new practice, especially early on? You started yours like maybe a year and a half out. So how did you find that financial balance? Because I think that's like a scary point for a lot of people.
It is scary for sure. Once you buy or start a practice, I mean, you're not really going to think a lot about your line of credit much anymore. What I mean by that is, I mean, your line of credit is going to be maybe around 300,000 or so, maybe more. But even if it is now, I mean, my first practice I bought, now it's 1.7 million on a loan. So it doesn't seem quite as scary. And also, like, I bought my first practice, so 5 months out. So I had 5 months, and I just grinded for the 5 months to try to pay off as much as I possibly could. Wasn't able to pay it all off in 5 months, of course, but, you know, I tried to knock it down as much as I could to maybe bring down the stress level a bit. You got to do what's comfortable for you. Honestly, you do. A lot of people ask me too, if you have a line of credit, are you still able to buy a practice? Like, will the bank allow you to buy a practice? And the quick answer is yes. I mean, they don't really care too much about your line of credit. What's the crazy part is that, like, let's say me, I have multiple practices and I have a proven track record of being able to manage multiple practices. But if one of you guys graduate and just come out and want to buy a practice, they're going to say yes to you faster than they're going to say yes to me. That's how it works with the banks, because you are not as leveraged as I am, right? They're going to look and say, oh, this guy's only, like, Bob only has $300,000 of student loans, whereas Jake has, you know, X amount of dollars in student loans. He's got, you know, over $1 million of practice loans. We're going to give it to Bob because he's a safer bet in our situation. That's how banks are going to look at it. It's a really backwards way of looking at it, that's thinking that, you know, it's more risky to give a practice to me than to somebody who hasn't had a practice yet, but that's how it works. And yeah, I'd say just, you know, think about your student debt. You got it. That's important, right? But just keep paying it off as quickly as you can. And I'd say maybe a safe number to get down to on student loans is like, maybe get down to like 100 grand, you know, so you have 100 grand left on there and you'll be able to pay it off. I mean, if you choose to buy a practice and let's say the practice is making profits, so you still take as an owner your 40% of the procedures you do, right? So that's what you live on. But if the practice has money left over at the end of the day, you could also take that money or some of the money as dividends at the end of the year. So that could help you pay off your loan actually faster. I choose not to do that because I'd rather use that money to help grow the practice and also to pay off the practice loan faster. That's what I would rather do. But not everybody chooses to do that, right? So just know that buying a profitable practice could actually, in theory, help you pay off your student loans faster. I haven't done it that way. I don't recommend, you know, one or the other. Either way, I'm just telling you kind of what's available. Again, I'm not the financial expert, right? I saw Vic in the chat, so shout out to him. He's here. He's the guy who knows more about that than I do. But yeah, I can't even remember what the original question was, but hopefully,
that's okay. I think you answered it.
Yeah.
The actually, speaking of the student debt and stuff, I know our teams talked to a few accounting companies and such, and they've mentioned that as a first year dentist coming out, there's actually quite a lot of tax benefit that you can take advantage of. Like there's tuition credits and a few other things. Could you speak a little bit onto that? Because I'm actually quite unknowledgeable about that.
Yeah, so am I. But no, honestly, like the first year, like, yeah, you have a ton of tax credits available, and it's great because, you know, come tax time, you're getting money back and instead of giving money away, right? But depending on how busy you are and how much money you make in your first year or two, you're going to burn through the tax credits very quickly. But at the same time, they're amazing, right? Like I'll take whatever I can get. And you will as well. So I can't remember the exact number, of money that I have saved or gotten back over the years from tax credits, but like I burned through them in my first year, I believe, but it still helped a lot. But again, I'm not the tax guy here. That'd be a conversation you have with your accountant. And as long as you find, the right accountant for you, which I mean, Vic and I can help you with that as well. If you find the right guy or girl, just delegate the accounting to them. That's what they do, right? As dentists, we're control freaks. We want to do everything, but you got to find, the right people to delegate to.
Right. And going back to
you see Vic's thing here, it's 15% for federal credit and 5% for provincial. Okay, so Vic's posting some stuff for you guys there.
Cool. One of the other questions that we got earlier on was about dental brokers. I know you mentioned them previously, but what are some of the considerations that dentists should have when choosing a dental broker?
Just whatever's available. I mean, I subscribe to all of them. There's like off the top of my head, there's Roy, so ROI, Roy Corp, Hill Kindy, Tier 3. There's PPS. What's the other one? Dental Place or Dental Law, I believe. But yeah, I just subscribe to all of them, and whenever they post listings, I see what they are, and I have a look at the opportunity, and I have a look at the appraisal. And in my Dentistry Disrupted event, I go through how to read an appraisal and what to look for. I look for like 3 main things, and if those things don't check out, I don't even look at the rest of the. I don't even think about it anymore. It's gone. But if those 3 things check out, then I look further and I dive deeper. But yeah, to answer the question, I mean, it doesn't matter who the broker is, just whatever's available. Like it's a crazy market out there. So beggars can't be choosers type of thing. You can't pick a certain broker, just whatever's available. Like you gotta jump on that if it makes sense for you, right?
Mm-hmm. And another question that we kind of skipped over earlier was, what's the deal with dentists having a cap for 5 practices? And would you recommend staying within 5 or less? I know that's probably a big subjective question because everyone's kind of different in what their vision is, but what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Generally, the 5 to 6 mark is where banks start saying no to you. So I think maybe that's a reason why a lot of dentists stop there. After 5 or 6, a lot of times you have to put some of your own money in, or some of your money from your corporation in there, because they see you as high risk and you're too leveraged, and they see you as an investor now and not as a dentist who's going to be there. So in their minds, if you're a solo practitioner and you can be at the practice every day, that's less risk for them than somebody who's an investor, no matter what their track record is. So yeah, that's why I think you see a lot of that 5 to 6 practice like cap. Also a lot of headaches. I mean, like to go to 1 to 2 is it's a big jump. A lot of people think that going from 2 to 3, it's like a linear jump, but it's exponential. Every practice, it seems like you add until like that 5 practice mark becomes a lot harder than the last. And it goes to show you, like the last year, like I said, like it's been crazy because we had the pandemic. But I was telling the guys, I feel like I've aged 5 years this year, just because there's been a lot going on, a lot of practices as well, and every one of them is a different challenge. The more practices you have, the more staff you have to manage as well. That's a challenge in and of itself. That's something that nobody ever gets taught. The bigger patient base you have, and the more things that you have, the more things that you own the more things that can go wrong potentially, right? It's really good when it's good, but it can really suck sometimes when it's bad. So sometimes when it rains, it pours, as we all know, right? So I think maybe that's why as well that you see a lot of people maybe stopping there, because they just don't want the extra headaches of having more. And it's not necessarily you make X with 1 practice and 5X with 5. Doesn't necessarily work that way. So if you don't do it because you want to make more money, I mean, you definitely can make more money if you do more, but don't let that be your driving kind of motivating factor to do it that way. Because you could make a ton in 1 practice. Like if you just focus all your attention, all your energy on that 1 practice, making it like a beast of a practice, A good example of that is so Dr. Azim Sheikh, Sheik. He's in Brampton, and he actually taught the course that I was at last weekend with the sinus lifts, and he has one practice, but he focuses all his energy and all his attention on that one practice, and he's made it an absolute efficiency powerhouse. So I bet you he's doing a lot better than most multi-practice owners. And so there is a lot of different ways to do it. So just don't let money be the motivating factor for you.
Yeah, I think that practice called the Brampton Dental Arts. He's really big into implants,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, yeah, I've heard great things about him, and I think you're totally right. Like, I think for a lot of people, going from associateship to one practice would be a huge headache, and they might not even want to continue after that. And I know you mentioned that every practice that you get is kind of new learning experience. What are some mistakes that you would say in hindsight that you made along the way that maybe we can learn from?
Mistakes. I'm trying to think of the biggest ones. I made a lot of little ones. I guess the biggest mistake that I can probably think of is maybe, they always say hire slowly and fire quickly. That's a big mistake that I've noticed. I mean, in what I've done, like, I know that in Shelburne, I had to hire like so many assistants because a lot of mine retired. Right. So they were at the age where they wanted to slow down. This hot shot, comes in and buys a practice. And now they're like, you know what? I don't need this. I'm out. And so I had to hire a lot of new people. And I actually got caught up, and I hired somebody a little bit too quickly. And they turned out to be like toxic for the office. Like, I noticed that it was just like, it completely changed the feeling and the atmosphere of the office. And you'll see that, like, there's that one person sometimes that they could be nice to your face, but as soon as you turn around, like, it's something goes off, and they're spreading rumors, they're gossipy, and it completely changes the vibe of the office. And that person, I mean, they don't belong in my office. And so I hired her a little too quickly, but then I ended up firing her quickly as well. So I learned my lesson there. Maybe take a little bit more time to hire. But you still have to fire swiftly if you have to, right? And a lot of dentists are afraid of that firing part, so they don't necessarily ever do it. They just want to live with that person every day because they're just afraid of confrontation. That's another thing too. It's like the amount of success that you have is going to be completely correlated with the amount of uncomfortable conversations that you're willing to have. So my biggest thing, I think at the beginning, was kind of maybe avoiding some issues that I didn't really want to deal with, but then they just build up and they compound, snowball. So you just really have to jump on issues as they arise. And if that even means having an uncomfortable conversation with somebody, so be it, has to happen. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And so I'd say that's maybe the biggest mistake.
Okay, and I think we're kind of closing in on our time, so maybe we'll take one or two more questions.
Yeah.
One of the questions from our president actually was, as a multi-practice owner, do you recommend branding your clinic under a central entity or keeping the affiliations between locations less obvious?
Completely up to you. I mean, it has no, doesn't matter. I mean, I know that, so my practices are like, the only reason I use the same logo for them is just because I liked the logo and I didn't want to have to make another decision to do another logo again. So that was basically the reason why I did it. So I'm not really focusing on trying to make like an entity of practices. And if I do, I don't really care if they're not branded under the same thing. So it really doesn't matter. It's totally dependent on what you want to do. I'd say maybe for the general practitioner, again, this is it totally depends on the person. You'll probably ask different people and they'll give you different answers. But I'd say maybe for a GP, maybe have them under different names, right? But it really doesn't matter, honestly. Either way works. Okay,
good to know. Yeah, because I've seen your logo with the 3 teeth with the colorful thing. Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, I like the logo, so I was just like, when it was time to make a new office, I just use that one. It was just easier that way.
And I guess we can end off on this more philosophical question: is what motivated you to become an owner of multiple practices? Because I know even when we were talking earlier, like, you were interested in looking at locations as early as 3rd year. So where did that motivation come from you to become an owner of multiple practices?
Yeah, that's a good question. You kind of know if you're that type of person or not. I think if you really are honest with yourself and you know what your personality is, like you know yourself better than most, I would say. So I'm the type of guy who, if I get into something, like I really get into it. Like I'm not one of those people who are, how some people are just good at everything, and where they could talk to you about everything. I've never been that guy. I've just been kind of laser focused on maybe a few different things, right? And dentistry just happened to be one of them. And the multiple location thing, I mean, I'll be honest, at the beginning, like when I was in dental school and earlier, it was like, I can make more money that way and maybe achieve financial freedom faster. But as I started to do it, I started to notice a shift in my mentality and a shift in my purpose and my motivations to keep going. And as I mentioned, it's just to influence as many people as possible, to grow a network of professionals that treat people really well and that treat each other well, right? And creating opportunities for people as well, like other dentists, like creating opportunities that they can get into as well and maybe buy in the future, and we can all grow together. And that's kind of like, that's my mindset right now. It's no longer about the money. That's what it is. So your motivation is probably going to change, as you go. But that is my motivation right now. At the beginning, it was money. Now it's not anymore. Because if it were money, I just probably just sell everything and do it all over again. But that's not what I want to do. Like I don't want to sell anything, right?
But yeah, I think that motivation comes across like very, very, very clear. Sometimes in the dentistry field, it's hard to find people who are very, very transparent like you are with pretty much everything. And I think that can really yield like a good learning experience for everyone. And kind of like we were talking about, like all rise together instead of, like I'll do my own thing and you can't see what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. But I think, yeah, I think we've taken up quite a bit of your time. So on behalf of the DEBI team and all of our audience, we genuinely want to say thank you. It's a big ask for us to ask if you're for like an hour and a half of your time and to be so generous and so candid. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. Honestly, it was an honor. And thank you everybody for attending. Really appreciate your time. I know that can't get back time, right? So I want to make it worth it for you guys. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and if anyone hasn't, check out the other Dr. Carriere talks on YouTube. I think they're actually fabulous. He gets into much more nitty gritty things that we maybe didn't have time to talk about right now. But yeah, I think a lot of the questions probably will get answered there. And just one last thing that we could ask from our audience is, we're going to post a quick little feedback survey for the new year. This is likely going to be our last event for this year, since we have exams coming up in December. In the new year, we want to try out a few things, and we want to kind of get your input on it. So I think Nima and our president will post the feedback survey right now or relatively soon. And yeah, we'd love your feedback. And again, all the 30 Christian Samuels, thank you, Dr.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank all you Christians. Thank you so much for attending. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll be the end. And yeah, thank you for attending, and we'll see you hopefully in the near future, sir.
Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah, take care.